Okay, so this chapter, we are focusing on what we call quadratics. A quadratic is a type of equation. We've learned linear equations where quadratics are, quadratic equations. So the standard form for a quadratic equation, instead of y equals mx plus b, which is the linear equation, it's ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are numerical values, okay? The graph of a quadratic equation is shaped like a U, and it could be a regular U or it can be an upside down U, which we'll talk about a little later. This U shape is called a parabola, or if you want to keep it where you can remember, it's, I think, parabola, because it looks like a bowl. But it could be upside down U or regular U, okay? So we're going to talk about key features of quadratic equations or quadratic lines. The axis of symmetry, and you should know this word symmetry from geometry in 7th and 6th grade, is a vertical line, so that means a vertical line going up and down, that divides the parabola into two equal parts. So, for instance, this picture right here, the vertical line would mean a vertical line that goes right down the center, the middle, that divides it into two equal parts. Same thing here. It's a line that goes down the center and divides it into two equal parts. Now, we're going to learn how to do this in the calculator, and we're going to learn the formula for it. The formula for finding the axis of symmetry is the opposite of whatever B is over 2 times whatever A is. And that's just a quick little formula to figure out what the axis of symmetry is, or I can do it visually, so I'll show you both ways. Then we have something called the vertex. The vertex is either the lowest point, which we also call the minimum, or the highest point, which is what we call the maximum. So if I'm looking at this shape, a regular U, this has a minimum because it's the lowest point, whereas if it's an upside down U, then this has a maximum, which is its highest point, okay? Now, how do I know which way the parabola is going to face? It depends on what the value of A is. So if A is positive, that means the parabola is going to open up, okay? It's going to look like a regular U, okay? So for instance, this one, x squared plus 2x minus 5, is going to open upwards, and it's going to cross the y-axis at negative 5. If A is negative, so if the leading coefficient is a negative value, then it's going to do the opposite, and it's going to open down. Okay, so it's going to be an upside down U. In this case, see how A is negative here? It's going to open downward, and the y-intercept would be positive 7 in this case. Okay, so let's break it down. This is exactly what your assignment's going to look like. You're just going to tell me the features that we can describe these. Okay, so for number 1, here's my equation. If they didn't give me the graph, then I could look at the graph on my calculator by going to y equals and typing this equation in, x squared minus 2x minus 3, and I could see the same identical graph if they didn't give it to me on my paper. I could still look at the same features. So let's describe this graph, shall we? First, we're going to decide which way it's opened. Is it opened up or is it opened down? In this case, it's opened up. Okay. The vertex is the minimum or the maximum. In this case, it's the minimum, the lowest point. So what is this lowest point? All you have to tell me is what the coordinate is. In this case, it's 1, negative 4 is the vertex. Okay, I could also look at it here, but it's a little tougher to see, so I'll show you how to find that later. The axis of symmetry is, if I were to draw a vertical line that goes straight down the center or straight down the vertex, we have to figure out what this line is. And the axis of symmetry is always x equals, and then I have to figure out where it crosses the x-axis. So it crosses the x-axis at positive 1. So that's the axis of symmetry. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. In this case, it crosses the y-axis at negative 3. You can also find the y-intercept in the equation -3 right here. So that's another way to find the y-intercept. Now, is it a minimum or is it a maximum? Right here, does it have a low point or does it have a high point? In this case, it has a low point, so we're going to call that the minimum. So that's all we're going to focus on today, is just the vocab. So let's do number 2. Number 2, the equation is -x² minus 6x minus 10. They've given me the graph here, but if they didn't, I could type it into my calculator. So opening, is it opened upward or is it opened downward? In this case, it's opened down. The vertex is where is the minimum or the maximum, in this case right here, the highest point. And what is this coordinate? This is -3, -1. That's the vertex, okay? The axis of symmetry is if I were to draw a vertical line that goes through this vertex, okay, it's always x equals where it crosses the x-axis is -3. The y-intercept, it's hard to tell on this graph because it looks like it's going to cross the 8. So if I can't visually see where it's going to cross the y-axis, we're going to use the equation. The y-intercept is the c value. So the y-intercept is -10, or technically 0, -10. Just like this should be 0, -3, so I apologize. And then we decide, is it a minimum or a maximum? Does it have a low point or a high point? In this case, it has a high point, which we call the maximum. Okay. Number 3, another example, x² plus 2x minus 1. They've given me the graph here. So opening up or down. In this case, it's opened up. The vertex is either the high point or the low point. In this case, it's the low point. And this coordinate is -1, -2. The axis of symmetry is if I were to draw a vertical line that goes through the vertex, okay, it's always x equals, and it crosses the x-axis at -1. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, which is here at -1, which they also tell me in the equation, but we write it 0, -1. And then does it have a minimum or maximum? In this case, it has a minimum because it has the lowest point. It will never have both minimum and maximum. It'll be one or the other. Last one, -x² minus 10x minus 30. So if we look at it, this graph right here, it is opened down. The vertex is that maximum right here, so it's -5, -5. Okay. The axis of symmetry is if I were to draw a vertical line through that vertex, it would be x equals, the x-axis it crosses at -5. Now, in this one, I can't see where it's going to cross the y-axis, and you don't want to guess. So you need to use the equation. The y-intercept is that c value, so it would be 0, -30. Minimum or maximum, in this case, it has a high point, so it's going to be referred to as the maximum. So just learning the vocab today and making sure you know what the opening is, the vertex, the axis of symmetry, the y-intercept, and the minimum or the maximum.